The night was still, almost too still. No dogs barked. No cars passed by. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Then it came. The knock. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't polite. It was sharp, hollow and heavy, like someone striking metal against wood. Each echo rolled through the quiet house, stretching into the darkness like a warning no one wanted to hear. Inside, the homeowner froze. His chest tightened, heart pounding harder with every echo. He knew what normal knocks sounded like. Neighbors asking for help, packages at the door, friends dropping by. This was different. This was wrong. He didn't move at first. He just listened. The silence between each knock felt endless, as if the world itself waited for him to answer. Finally, with a slow step, he went to the door. Through the glass, figures stood in the glow of the porch light. 4 of them, still, silent. Their faces were pale and stiff, like masks without life. In their hands, long sheets of paper glimmered faintly under the light. It was the HOA board, but something about them was off. Their suits were pressed too perfectly, their shoes lined up with exact precision. Not one of them shifted, blinked, or breathed in a normal way. They stood like statues, yet their presence filled the air with weight. One of them raised a hand, pressing the papers forward. His voice, when it came, was cold and flat. Rules must be obeyed. The words were simple, but the way he said them made the homeowner's skin crawl. There was no warmth, no human tone, just a strange echo, like 2 voices speaking at once. The homeowner's hand gripped the doorknob but didn't turn it. His instinct screamed to keep the barrier closed. Something about their eyes wasn't right. They were too sharp, too dark, like glass polished to hide what lurked beneath. The air thickened, heavy as stone. The homeowner felt as though opening the door wouldn't just let in the HOA, it would let in something else, something waiting. And in that heavy silence, a thought struck him like lightning. This wasn't just about rules. This wasn't about grass height, paint color, or mailboxes. This was about control. The knock, the papers, the blank faces, everything about it felt wrong, like a game he hadn't agreed to play. He knew deep inside that answering them would not be the end. It would be the beginning of something far bigger. As the figures waited, their shadows stretching long across the porch, the homeowner's pulse raced faster. His breath grew shallow. The knock had opened more than just a door. It had opened a battle. But what kind of battle? Against who? And why here? Why him? One thing was certain. This night would not end the same way it had started. And as the board members stood silently, their strange papers glowing under the pale porch light, the question burned hotter and louder than the knock itself. Why had the HOA come here? And what did they really want? The papers rustled as the leader of the HOA lifted them higher. His voice cut through the night again, sharp and cold. You must change the garage, the lights, even the paint on your door. Each word landed heavy, without pause, without doubt, as though read from a script written long before. It wasn't a conversation. It wasn't even a warning. It was a sentence. The homeowner stayed still, one hand on the doorknob, the other pressed against the wall to steady himself. He knew these rules well enough. He had seen neighbors complain, argue, even pay fines. But tonight felt different. The way the leader spoke made the rules sound less like guidelines and more like commands carved in stone. The board members didn't blink. Their eyes followed every small movement, like machines waiting for input. Their voices, when they spoke together, were too smooth, too exact. the same tone, the same rhythm. Rules must be obeyed. The words came again, louder now, as if the walls themselves carried their sound. A shiver ran down the homeowner's back. Something inside him whispered, "This isn't about paint. This isn't about a garage. This was about control." He could feel it in the way they leaned closer, in the way their shadows pushed past the glass of the door as though they wanted to step inside without being invited. The leader took one step forward, just one, but it was enough to fill the small porch with weight. His face looked calm, but there was something underneath, something that didn't belong. His jaw moved, like it had been taught how to smile, yet the eyes above it didn't follow. "You will fix it, or you will regret it." The words hung in the air like a blade. The homeowner's chest tightened, not from fear alone, but from a rising anger. These weren't simple demands. This was a claim over his home, over his freedom. He realized in that moment that if he gave in, if he agreed to change the lights, the paint, the garage, he would be giving them far more than bricks and wood. He would be giving them power. The silence between them grew sharp, pressing against the walls of the house, pressing against his own thoughts. He wanted to speak, to refuse, but the dread in the room made words feel heavy on his tongue. Still, deep inside, he knew one truth. If he obeyed, they would never stop. And if he resisted, he would have to face whatever the HOA really was. The leader's pale face leaned closer to the glass. His voice dropped, almost a whisper, but sharper than before. "This is your only warning." And with that, the papers in his hand slid against the door, the sound like knives dragging across wood. The demand had been made. The choice had to be his, too. The homeowner's hand tightened on the doorknob. For a moment he thought about opening the door, about taking the papers just to make it all end. But deep down, he knew the truth. Once he signed, he would lose far more than paint or lights. So he stood tall. Through the glass, his eyes locked with the leader's cold stare. His voice came out steady, sharper than he expected. "No." The word was small, but in that silence, it thundered. The papers froze mid-air. The other board members stopped moving, like machines without commands. The night itself seemed to pause, waiting for what came next. The leader tilted his head, a faint smirk twisting across his face. It wasn't human. It was too smooth, too practiced, like a mask bending the wrong way. "You refuse?" he asked. The homeowner said nothing. He didn't need to. His silence was the answer. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the leader's lips curved wider. The smirk grew, but his eyes stayed empty. He lowered the papers slowly, letting them hang at his side. "You'll regret this." The words carried weight, but not just weight. An echo. A strange metallic vibration shook the air, as though two voices overlapped, one human and one not. It slid across the walls, through the glass, into the bones of the house. The homeowner's breath hitched. His stomach twisted, but his legs didn't move. He had seen enough to know these weren't ordinary people. The way they stood, the way they spoke, the way their words seemed to dig inside his head. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. He stared at the four figures, and for the first time, he wondered if the HOA board in front of him had ever been human at all. Still, he didn't back down. Fear pressed on his chest, but behind it was something stronger, anger. This was his home, his door, his life, and no hollow voice, no mask of power would take it away. The leader, Lao, leaned closer, his shadow stretching long and sharp across the glass. The echo of his voice whispered one last time. This was your choice? Then the board members turned in perfect unison, their shoes striking the porch in rhythm. Without a word more, they walked into the darkness, leaving the papers pressed against the door. The homeowner didn't move. He just stood there, staring at the spot where they had been. His pulse was racing, but his choice was clear. He had resisted, and now, whatever they really were, they would come back. The house stayed silent long after the HOA board left. The homeowner sat by the window, staring into the night, waiting for sleep that never came. Every creak of the walls, every shift of the wind, felt like another knock on the door. Then, just past midnight, the first light appeared. It floated above the street, soft at first, like a lantern in the dark, but it grew brighter, sharper, casting long beams that cut across the houses. Soon more lights appeared, circling, pulsing, as though searching for something. The homeowner's stomach tightened. He knew they had come back. Out on the road, the HOA board gathered. 4 figures again, but this time they didn't stand still. They leaned close to one another, whispering. The sound wasn't like human speech. It was broken, twisted, filled with clicks and echoes, like wires sparking in the dark. The words didn't belong to Earth. The homeowner pressed closer to the window, heart pounding, and then he saw it. For just a moment, their faces flickered. The pale skin rippled like water, slipping away to reveal something beneath. Not human, their eyes stretched wider than they should, glowing faintly, too bright for any man or woman. Their mouths curled in shapes no human jaw could make. Their shadows bent the wrong way under the streetlight, long and crooked, as if the ground itself rejected them. The truth struck hard. They weren't neighbors. They weren't even people. They were creatures from far beyond, wearing human shapes like cheap suits. And the HOA rules were nothing but a mask. Their plan wasn't about clean yards or painted doors. It was about breaking humans, slowly, quietly, until no one stood against them. One house at a time, one family at a time, until the will of mankind itself was gone. But tonight, they had chosen the wrong house. The homeowner felt fear, yes, but beneath it something else stirred. Defiance. Humanity had faced storms, wars, and darkness before, and every time humans had stood up, had fought back. If these creatures thought they could win with rules and papers, they had no idea what kind of spirit lived behind a locked door. The lights above the street pulsed again, brighter now, almost alive. The creatures turned their heads in perfect unison, as though listening to a signal. Their whispers grew louder, scraping through the night air. The homeowner stepped back from the window. He knew they would come again, and when they did, it wouldn't be with papers. It would be with something far worse. But he also knew one thing. He would be ready. The lights above the street faded at last, but the homeowner knew it was only the beginning. The creatures had shown their faces. They would return, and when they did, they wouldn't come quietly. He could not wait for help. He could not count on anyone else. It was his house, his fight. So he prepared. In the quiet of the night, he walked through the rooms, mind racing. He remembered old stories, how humans had always survived the impossible. Against storms, against armies, against enemies far stronger, they had endured. Not because they were the biggest, not because they had the sharpest weapons, but because they were clever, because they never gave up. That was the weapon he still had. In the garage, he dug through shelves and boxes, Old tools lay buried under dust. Coils of wire, nails, pipes, batteries, broken machines he had never thrown away. Strange gadgets sat forgotten, things his father once built. Strange ideas from a time when people fixed what they had instead of buying new. He spread it all out on the floor. To anyone else it would look like junk. To him, it was an arsenal. He worked in silence, eyes sharp, hands steady. He twisted wires into snares, set traps across windows, lined the yard with hidden points of defense. Every corner of the house became part of his plan. In the basement, he rigged lights to burst bright at a single switch. In the hallway, he stretched wire thin across the floor, ready to trip whoever stepped inside. Even the lawn itself became a field of tricks, each bush and fence line hiding something waiting to strike. It wasn't about firepower. It wasn't about strength. It was about surprise. Because that was what humans did best. Turn the simple into the powerful, the weak into the strong. As he worked, the fear in his chest shifted into something else. Focus, resolve. Every twist of a screw, every knot tied, made his heart beat steady. He was no soldier, no fighter, but he was human, and humans had always fought back. By dawn, his home was no longer just a house. It was a fortress, built not of stone or steel, but of ingenuity. He stood in the center of the room, looking around at the work of his hands. His chest rose with a deep breath. He was ready. And when the HOA returned, they would learn the truth. They had chosen the wrong door. The second knock came with no warning. This time it wasn't sharp and hollow. It was violent, booming, shaking the walls as if the whole house might split apart. The sound rattled the glass, tore through the silence, and carried the same cold demand as before. Obey. The homeowner's breath steadied. His traps were ready. His heart no longer raced with fear, it burned with resolve. He reached for the lock and pulled the door open. The HOA stood there once again, their faces pale and stiff, but now their eyes glowed faintly in the dark. Behind them, machines moved, tall, metallic shapes with legs like blades and wires twisting from their frames. They hummed with energy, built to enforce obedience. The leader raised his hand. You will submit. But before the machines could cross the threshold, the first trap snapped. Wires whipped up from the ground, tangling their legs, yanking them sideways. Sparks flew as metal slammed into the porch, parts snapping loose. The board members did not flinch, but their machines stumbled again and again, each step broken by clever tricks hidden in the yard. Nets fell, lights burst, small gadgets exploded with blinding flashes. The perfect order of the board cracked under the weight of human chaos. The leader hissed, voice splitting with that metallic echo. This is not allowed. But the homeowner stood tall in the doorway, voice strong and clear. This is my home, and you're not welcome. The fight spread. Neighbors, drawn by the noise, stepped outside. At first they only watched, but when they saw what the board truly was, their fear turned to fire. One by one they joined in. Pots and pans clanged from windows. Hoses sprayed down machines, shorting wires. Old tools became weapons in human hands. The street filled with shouts, not of fear, but of defiance. For the first time, the board was outnumbered. The creatures had thought to hurt humans weak, divided, easy to break with rules and fines, but they had forgotten what happened when humans stood together. Machines sparked and failed. The board's rhythm broke. Their blank faces showed something new, hesitation, and in the glow of shattered lights and burning wires, the truth became clear. Humanity would not bow. That night, a street of simple homes became a battlefield, and for once, it was not the board that held power. It was the people. Smoke drifted across the street. Broken wires sparked in the grass. The machines, once tall and perfect, now lay scattered in twisted heaps. The neighbors stood side by side, their breaths heavy, their faces lit with firelight and defiance. And the HOA board, their masks were shattered. The pale skin peeled and rippled, exposing what hid beneath. Their eyes burned with unnatural light, wide and sharp, nothing human left in them. Their voices cracked into screeches that carried no words, only anger and confusion. For the first time, the creatures looked unsettled. For the first time, they looked afraid. They stepped back, their once perfect rhythm broken, their unity torn apart. They had come with certainty, with arrogance, believing one house, one family, would be easy to break. But instead, they had faced something they never expected: human resistance. And they had lost. The leader's glowing eyes darted from the wreckage to the people who now stood firm in the street. His mouth opened, but no command came. The strength in his voice was gone. The homeowner walked forward. His steps were steady, his voice sharper than steel. "You knocked on the wrong door." The words hit harder than any trap. They echoed in the silence, carrying more power than all the strange rules and false laws the creatures had tried to enforce. The board staggered back, their shapes flickering as though their borrowed human forms could no longer hold. One by one, they turned and retreated into the shadows. The strange lights above the street dimmed, then vanished, leaving only the night sky behind. But as they disappeared, one truth settled heavy in the air. This was not the end. The fight wasn't over. The creatures had tested humans and failed, but they would try again, somewhere else, with new tricks, new masks. They would return. Yet the night had proven something stronger. Humans did not bow, not to rules, not to fear, not to powers that thought themselves greater. The street fell quiet once more, but the silence no longer felt heavy. It felt earned, victorious. The neighbors exchanged looks, tired but proud, knowing they had stood together and won. And inside his home, the homeowner finally closed the door, not in fear, but in triumph. Because tonight, the HOA had learned a lesson they would never forget.